Segment 3, Gold and Black Live, and Brian Newbert joining, still uploading videos as he goes. He's working hard, but he's a right brain, left brain person. He can do it. He can do that and carry on a conversation at the same time. Brian, Tom Dienhart, another guy that can carry on a conversation, can chew gum and walk at the same time. That's a good compliment for you, Tom. How are you doing?
Hey, Alan, that's the best thing I've heard in years, my friend. I'm doing really good. Looking forward to heading up to Chicago next week, seeing this Big Ten tournament. I'm not sure how much intrigue's there, Alan. I think there's 7 Big Ten teams that are in this NCAA tournament. I guess the schools will be jockeying for just their seeding position in the Big Ten at that point.
Well, and you know, it is certainly a situation too with the Big Ten tournament on the men's side, obviously, that not anybody can win it, but there's going to be a lot of intrigue come starting next Thursday. Anything surprise you? I mean, you know, there's been so much talk about the Big Four, Big Five, really the Big Four, I guess, with Ohio State, Michigan State, Indiana, and Michigan. But did it surprise you at the end of the day that Indiana will go into that tournament as the #1 seed?
I guess I'm not shocked. You know, going all the way back to November, Alan, I guess everybody thought the Hoosiers were going to be the best team. Here they are heading to Chicago as the #1 seed in the tournament, supposedly already with the #1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So you have to be impressed, I guess. It's one thing to come out of nowhere, be an underdog, and have a great season. It's something entirely different to go in with massive expectations as a preseason #1 team and then to deliver on those over a 3-month period. So far, so good for Indiana, Alan. But I think, like you said, you talked about the Big Four in the Big Ten. It wouldn't be a shock if any one of those 4 teams, Michigan, Michigan State, you know, Ohio State, would have a shot at it, and Indiana would have a shot at winning this thing.
Yeah. You know, I guess you want to ask him?
I'm sorry, what?
No. Just giving Brian a hard time. Go ahead.
Tom, do you think the Big Ten Player of the Year is the National Player of the Year?
You know what? Yeah, Brian, I think so. You know, Otto Porter of Georgetown is getting a lot of hype, and rightly so. He's coming on like gangbusters. Georgetown lost a tough game this week, but I think you're right. I think that's going to be one and the same. I think the Big Ten Player of the Year is going to be the National Player of the Year, and you know what? Sunday, 4 o'clock Eastern time, national television, a CBS audience. I think Trey Burke is going to punctuate his candidacy. I think the guy's not had a bad game all year. There's some stat where he scored 15 points in every Big Ten game this year.
It's unbelievable.
You guys saw what he did the other night. Again, I think he's going to be the Big Ten Player of the Year and the National Player of the Year.
You know, it's interesting though. We were looking up, and with the flow of that basketball game, you know, in Mackey Arena, you look up and you can see how many points everybody has as the game's going on. You're sitting there with 4 minutes into the second half, or approximately that, and he's got 4 points, and just absolutely took the game over really from that point forward.
Yeah, it was really special what he did in crunch time and when his team needed him. You know, and what did Victor Oladipo do on Tuesday night on his home court on senior night? The chance to win the Big Ten outright, and Oladipo was nowhere to be found during crunch time. So I'm not taking anything away from Oladipo. That's just one recent example of Burke's brilliance and how he didn't let his team down when it really needed him the most. And you know what, to me, guys, I'd love to hear your input on this. What about Big Ten Coach of the Year? I mean, to me, Thad Matta, if they win a share of the Big Ten 4 years in a row, 6 and 8 years, essentially a 2-man team, I think, with Aaron Craft and Sean Thomas. Some people think Tom Izzo, some people think Tom Crean, but to me that's going to be an intriguing race.
Brian, your comment, what's your thought there?
I mean, if you could split the vote 4 ways, I think, you know, we didn't mention Bo Ryan. I mean, he loses his point guard before the season. I think Bo Ryan, you can vote for him any year. You know, the fact that they were 1 game away from a share of the title in what's considered the best conference in the country, after they lost so many important players from last season and after they lost their point guard right before the season. I remember Big Ten Media Day up in Chicago this year. Bo Ryan gets up to the podium. All he talked about was Josh Gosser. He was the most important player on the team. Obviously, they had to replace Jordan Taylor from last season, so that guy was an absolute critical piece of that team, and they don't miss a beat. You know, here they are at the end of the year. Obviously, they lost to Purdue. sometimes with these conversations, I feel like we're talking about the Heisman Trophy, because it's like, it's not when you lose, or it's not how many times you lose, it's when you lose. You know, we're just talking about the Player of the Year deal, and, you know, we're talking about Trey Burke just had these great games right now, right before we all have to cast our votes, and Victor Oladipo didn't have a great game against Ohio State. Almost like that kind of takes away all the great games he had before then. But you also have certain moments too. You know, Victor Oladipo loses the ball at Illinois. Trey Burke steals the ball at Michigan State. You know, so it is kind of sort of like the Heisman Trophy a little bit. You get the moments too involved.
Yeah. Have you had, you know, in your years of watching Big Ten basketball, though, it's and you know, there have been years when there have been as many ranked teams, but it has been as good as it gets, in my view, in a long time, in terms of just, certainly since the Big Ten tournament's being played, it's pretty hard, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better field. Really, in some ways, when you look at Penn State, and you look at what Northwestern, I know Northwestern's really laboring with their injuries, et cetera, and losing last night, but 1 through 12, this is a league that's, I'm not saying that teams 6 through 12 are going to be able to beat many of the 1 through 5s, but this is still a pretty dangerous league from top to bottom.
Yeah, Alan, you're exactly right. Imagine if Northwestern had all its roster.
Yeah.
Imagine if Tim Frazier doesn't get hurt for Penn State. And look at what Tim Miles is ringing out of that roster at Nebraska.
Yeah.
And it is incredible. There are some easy outs have developed, but if everybody had their full complement of players, boy, it would be a heck of a conference. It already is a heck of a conference. And we saw Penn State obviously knock off Michigan without Frazier. So, yeah, expect anything, I think, in Chicago would be fair to say. And, you know, I was working on a story, and I talked to a couple of analysts, you know, Stephen Bardo and Dan Dockage, and I sort of asked those guys, I'd love to see what you guys think. Is a national championship a bust for the Big Ten? I mean, if they don't win a national title, given all the hype the Big Ten's got all year, would this season be considered a flop for the Big Ten?
Brian, I'll let you answer, then I'll come back.
I don't think so. I mean, so much can happen in the NCAA tournament. It shouldn't necessarily take away from everything you did during the season. That doesn't mean it doesn't in a lot of people's eyes. At the same time, too, the reason the Big Ten's considered so good, I think, as much as anything, it's its depth. It's not a matter of having that one dominant team, that one team that could absolutely run the table, but rather 3 or 4 very, very good to great ones. Obviously, Indiana's very good to great. Obviously, Michigan's very good to great. Michigan State has emerged as being of that same caliber. Ohio State's had a great year, too. I think in terms of the Big Ten, I don't know if the success or what have you of this season would be determined by a national championship so much as it was just the way the regular season played out, and just obviously what you want to see in the NCAA tournament. You want to see these teams win games, obviously, but I don't know if you necessarily have to have one of them win the whole thing just to make this season a success, or however you term it.
Well, it is a sunny day in Lafayette, but I'm going to be argumentative with Brian. I think the Big Ten I would needs to win it, only because and this ties into our next subject, which is football. The Big Ten. Maybe it's because of the Big Ten Network, because you're your employer, or maybe it's whatever it is, the way the rest of the nation looks at this league, and maybe it's because I sit in the middle of the Big Ten, I don't know, but they love to pick on the Big Ten, and then if the Big Ten doesn't come through this year, that will diminish it some. But, you know, as Brian has said, he's absolutely right. This is there's no guarantee. How many teams have we seen over the years that look like locks to get to the Final Four and don't, or win the national championship and don't? Though I would be surprised. I'd be shocked if there's no Big Ten team in the Final Four. I'd say that, and yet Indiana's got to do. You know, I keep thinking Indiana's a team that can't lose, but then they keep doing it. And the fact that they lose to Illinois, that's a bothersome loss. I know that they had a 15-point lead. That bothers me a little bit. And then the fact that they couldn't deal with Kraft and they lose on senior night, maybe that was an emotional deal, bothers me, though they've been my team that I really have liked the most, mainly because they put a 37-point beatdown on Purdue. I didn't like that, but I certainly appreciated what they did. That was an amazing performance.
You're exactly right, Alan. Those losses by IU really are disconcerting. It puts more doubt in my mind about how good this team really is. Same with Michigan, honestly. I'm just not totally sold on Michigan defensively. They're going to have to obviously outscore teams. They get the wrong matchup. I think they could be bounced out quickly. So we'll see. You know, it's 1999-2000. That's the last time the Big Ten won a national championship.
Right.
It's been a long time. And I know a one-and-done tournament, we all know anything can happen. But it's just getting to be put up or shut up time. And I think the Big Ten needs to deliver with a national championship. I know it's that doesn't undo the entire season of what was accomplished if the Big Ten doesn't do it. But golly, this is if not now, when? And again, it's a big challenge. But the Big Ten looks like it's got some teams that may be able to make that march to Atlanta.
And we had a couple questions that we haven't gotten to that talking about the Boilermakers in basketball, and obviously Brian doing it on a daily basis, and Tom, you're seeing a lot of Purdue basketball. An overriding question about is the future bright for Purdue basketball, and do you think the Boilermakers are back in 2013, 14, or will it take another year for Purdue to be an NCAA tournament team? I guess that's my question. Can Purdue make the NCAA tournament next year?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I think they can, Alan and Brian. I think most of that roster obviously is back, which is going to help. And I'm just assuming that the players like Ronnie Johnson have developed shots, continue to improve. Davis as well. And obviously A.J. Hammonds, you got the influx of 3 freshmen. The Scott kid from Fort Wayne's supposed to be special. You factor all that in, guys with the Big Ten that could take a lot of hits, not just seniors, but underclassmen, Oladipo, Zeller, and Burke, Deshaun Thomas, guys like that all going pro. So again, all those factors together, I think Purdue should have a good shot to make the big dance next year.
Brian, you gave a good one-word answer, but what drives that opinion for you?
Well, I think they have good enough players. I think they have a good enough coach, regardless of what a lot of people thought through the course of the year. I think they've shown some improvement here the last couple of games, and I think that's significant because what the improvement at the end of the year showed you is that this thing's not broken, that it can turn around. It just took a while, but it can turn around. I think Purdue's got a lot of talent coming back next year. It's a matter of, they just almost beat the number 7 team in the country Wednesday night, and they lose one guy who scored a point. But I just think they're going to have good enough players next year. The Big Ten's going to turn over like crazy. You're going to see the whole first team All Big Ten go pro early probably. And, I just think it's a matter of matching the players with the identity, and all of a sudden Purdue's going to be right back in business. I would expect them, as of right now, I don't shy away from saying this at all, I'd expect them to be a tournament team and a 20-plus win team again next year.
Hey, Brian, I read something you wrote this week, though. You thought Purdue got better when they stopped emphasizing A.J. Hammonds. A.J. Hammonds isn't going anywhere. How are they going to incorporate a big guy into a team that you thought plays a lot better when he's not the hub or the centerpiece of the offense?
Right. Well, you will have enough time removed from what Purdue wasn't used to before in terms of playing through the post, and now you just have more experience playing with it. And I'm operating under the fundamental assumption that all players get better. And A.J. Hammonds with a full off season and a lot of maybe soul searching, for lack of a better term, about maybe some of the things that led to his inconsistencies this year are going to make him a better player next year. And I think he's just going to be an even bigger piece of the puzzle next year. I think all his teammates next year are going to be more accustomed to playing with him, more accustomed to playing through the post. And what's to say next year you even have to play through the post? Obviously he's going to be one of your most talented guys, maybe your most talented guy, but that doesn't necessarily mean he has to be your centerpiece.
Yeah.
Early in the season, Purdue was so limited from a scoring perspective. He was their best option. You have to remember too, Tyrone Johnson opened the season with a bad ankle.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you could just emphasize him completely offensively. They spread the ball around so much. But for a while there, A.J. Hammonds was clearly their guy on offense, and they had to craft the style of basketball they played around him. What's to say next year they necessarily have to do that? If some guys improve, Ronnie Johnson gets better, Rafael Davis gets better, a couple of the freshmen come in and show they can play right away. What's to say it has to be the A.J. Hammonds show next year? He'll be a big piece of the puzzle, but he won't be the only piece of the puzzle.
Hey, Alan, A.J. Hammonds isn't the next Joe Barry Carroll, is he?
Well, we were talking about that early in the year and who had a better freshman year. And now, as it turns out, maybe how the last few games with A.J. Hammonds is you may have to lean towards Joe Barry Carroll. You could do a lot worse, and I know Joe Barry, not necessarily for Purdue folks, but for folks that know basketball, that when you're the first pick in the NBA draft, Joe Barry Carroll was a very good college player and not a bad pro, really. But it's going to be an interesting, it'll be interesting to see just all on what he develops and how he develops down the road. All right, I want to switch because we only got a couple minutes left. But in terms of spring football, Tom and Brian, certainly what are the storylines? Maybe start with Purdue, but also storylines around the Big Ten.
I tell you what, I'll just start with Ohio State. Just the defense there, guys, that the front seven is going to be their big key. They've already started practice in Columbus, earliest start ever. Defensive line's gone. 2 linebackers are gone. Again, that's going to be the storyline for what's going to probably be the best team in the Big Ten in 2013. I guess no real shocker there. I think Nebraska is going to be the favorite over in the Legends division, and guys, for them it's going to be a lot like Ohio State. It's going to be the defensive side of the ball that gets a lot of the attention in Lincoln, Nebraska. Their offense, like Ohio State's offense, is going to be loaded. But again, that defense was average at best last year, and again, their front seven needs to really get overhauled too. So those are 2 of the bigger storylines outside of Purdue, and obviously everything's new there in West Lafayette. A lot of excitement. I'll just say this. I'll be interested to see what the offense looks like, number one. And number two, I'm just really excited about the staff that Daryl Hazel's been able to build. I like both those coordinators a lot. And I tell you what, to me, I'll take Jim Bridge over Jim Bowman any day of the week. I think that's going to turn out to be great for Purdue. You have a tremendous coach and a great recruiter. So, and we all know you're only as good as the people around you. And I think Hazel's done a good job building that staff.
Yeah, Brian, you've been impressed by the staff, and yet it maybe, to use Abraham Lincoln terms, I don't know if it's a team of rivals by any stretch, but it is an eclectic group. Yeah. You do have some base, certainly with some guys that have worked with Daryl Hazel, but he's got some guys that he hasn't worked with as well.
Just on an aside, those are my thoughts exactly on the offensive line trade-off. I still haven't, I shouldn't say anything. I just haven't found very much positive input about Jim Bowman from the Ohio State. I just have never seen an assistant coach where the venom just finds them wherever they go. But no, just to talk about the staff real quick, they are very impressive guys. They've got personalities, they've got resumes, they seem like they know what they're doing. I know that sounds very basic, but sometimes it's not always
a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think they've all sort of bought into Daryl Hazel, what he wants to do with this program. They all talk about it. That they all defer to him. They all seem to have the utmost respect for him. They obviously have a difficult job here. Now, once all the era of good feeling here of the new coaching staff and whatnot settles in, you still got to play that schedule. Yeah. And obviously Purdue's got an uphill battle. If they didn't have an uphill battle coming up, they wouldn't have just changed coaches. What will be interesting too is that, and I don't know, maybe I'm making too much of this, is you got a lot of coaches who coached at, Florida State. You got guys who coached at North Carolina. You got guys who coach in the NFL. They're used to having the best talent possible. Here at Purdue, maybe you have to get the guy, it's going to take a couple of years to get them to that level of player. You aren't going to have the same resources personnel-wise to work with that you had at some of your past jobs. So perhaps there's a little bit of an adjustment there in terms of just what they have to work with. But obviously it's their job to go get what they have to work with. So, recruiting, as Purdue kind of moves forward with this new staff, recruiting is every bit as important as coaching. Yeah. Make no mistake about that. Obviously, when you hire assistant coaches, you don't just hire the coach, you hire the recruiter. So that's going to be an absolutely paramount to Purdue's success moving forward.
Hey, quarterback too, guys. I know we're running out of time, but I'd love to see what's going to happen at quarterback for Purdue, quarterback at Iowa, even quarterback at Michigan State and quarterback at Penn State. Those are some interesting battles. Again, the Purdue one, it's going to be fast. I want to see this Appleby kid and the kid from Terre Haute as well. So it's going to be fun to see what goes on there for Purdue.
Yeah, it's amazing the correlation between good quarterback play and winning. All right, hey Tom, thanks so much for your time, and we'll look forward to reading and hearing you down the road. Lots going on in Big Ten basketball and spring football just around the corner. Brian, thank you so much for joining us, but you didn't have a lot of choice, and we were glad you were here. We'll also thank our sponsors, Hilton Garden Inn, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, and of course, Follett's Purdue Pride. Don't forget that tent sale tomorrow, Mackey Arena, prior to Senior Day. Want to thank Lydia and Kim and Gordon, our friends at WLFI and WLFI.com, for all that you do for us, and we're very appreciative of that. We'll have the replay of this show. It was a brilliant show today if you missed part of it.
Extraordinary.
Extraordinary. We'll look forward to putting that up sometime around dinner time. We do not have a show next week. We'll be back in 2 weeks on the 22nd of March as we start to wrap up our season on Gold and Black Live. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, and thanks again for joining us, and have a great weekend and a great week ahead.